Today we will consider H.R. 471, the Scholarship for Opportunity Results Act, H.R. 899, a bill to amend Title 41 of the United States Code to extend the sunset date of certain protest of task and delivery order contracts, and H.R. 793, a bill to designate a facility of the United States Post Office located at 12781 Sir Francis Drake Boulevard in Inverness, California, which is the Bay Area, as the Specialist Jake Robert Vergosa Post Office. H.R. 471 recognizes, or reauthorizes, I'm having a great day, guys. H.R. 471 reauthorizes and makes improvements to the D.C. Opportunity Scholarship Program, a program created in 2003 that provides eligible low-income district parents an opportunity to attend a private school of their choice. This program is popular and successful. In a recent poll of the district residents, 74% responded supporting reauthorization and funding of this program. Further, a congressional mandated evaluation of OSP showed significant gains in academic achievement of students who use these scholarships. Over 21% were likely to graduate from high school, versus 21% more were likely to graduate from high school than from public high schools. The last Congress enacted legislation terminating this popular and successful program while allowing existing participants to continue through graduation. However, 216 students who were offered scholarships did have those offers rescinded by the U.S. Department of Education and Secretary Arne Duncan. The bill will bring up to date this program and continue students' participation, and will have several improvements to the original authorizing legislation. It requires participating private schools to maintain a valid certificate of occupancy issued by the District of Columbia, makes readily available information on its accreditation, demonstrates that the adequate financial resources to ensure its financial stability if it has been operating for less than 5 years, agree to site visits by the administrator, have financial systems in place to ensure funds are used according to this Act, and make certain each teacher of core subject matter has a bachelor or equivalent degree. Let there be no doubt today, this is a bill that the Speaker believes in very strongly, authored the bill himself. I'm a co-sponsor of the bill and a supporter. Today we will see many amendments undoubtedly. If they are good and practical and helpful, we will certainly consider them. But today, before close of business, this bill will be sent from the committee to the House floor for its consideration. With that, I recognize the gentleman from Maryland for his opening statement.
Thank you very much. I strongly, first of all, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I strongly oppose this bill. H.R. 471 is an attempt to reactivate the nation's first federally funded voucher program while at the same time undermining the public education system in the District of Columbia. We must help the district provide a high-quality education for all of the city's children. But we cannot accomplish that objective by diverting public funds to private institutions and away from public schools, which is essentially what a voucher program does. Public funds should support public education. Coming from the City of Baltimore, I understand firsthand the complexities of turning around struggling inner-city schools. In fact, over 4 years ago, I became deeply involved in improving one of my own neighborhood schools, the Maritime Industries Academy. It has taken vision, commitment, accountability, and, yes, resources to begin the process of turning this school around. We could not have achieved these successes if we instead used these precious resources to pay for vouchers for private schools. I've also sat on the charter school board of one of my daughter's schools for several years, and I know the value of charter schools. Unfortunately, H.R. 471 cherry-picks by helping a few students at the expense of the vast majority of the district's children. By dividing funding among D.C.'s public schools, public charter schools, and private school vouchers, H.R. 471 provides a third of the school funding to only 1.3% of the district's students. The lack of equity is stunning. Our focus should be on maximizing the impact of the Federal Government's limited resources to serve all of the district's 70,000 students. Now, it is so interesting that a few weeks ago, the majority offered H.R. 1 to fund the Federal Government for the rest of the year. This legislation would cut billions of dollars from programs that have proven effective and serve millions of low-income students across this nation. Programs such as Head Start, so that young kids can even get to the point of these youngsters who are sitting in the audience. Title I grants, special ed, cut, billions. School improvement grants, 21st Century Community Learning Centers, and math and science partnerships, cut drastically. In fact, we have a chart that shows the billions of dollars in cuts Republicans just supported, cuts that affect every single district in the United States of America. In light of these serious budget cuts, I was surprised that H.R. 471 does not address how its provisions are paid for. The majority has repeatedly argued that any appropriation should be paid for by offsets. In fact, the Republican conference rules discourage considering legislation without identifying offsets. Yet here we are, a little over 2 months into the 112th Congress, and one of the first bills we have taken up contains no explanation of how or even if these proposed expenditures will be paid for. As a longtime advocate of public education and quality education, as one who would not be here if it were not for public education, every single day of my schooling, from kindergarten through the 12th grade graduation, having never missed 1 hour of school, I appreciate public education. I support efforts to improve public schools for all students in a manner that is fiscally responsible. H.R. 471, however, fails to do either, which is why I continue to oppose the bill in its current form. If we just look at some of the cuts, Mr. Chairman, that the Republicans are dealing with overall, you're talking about $2 billion from the Head Start program, $700 million from Title I grants, $700 million from the National School Improvement Program. Those are the kinds of cuts that will hurt every child that's going to a public school in this entire country. And I think that as we begin to do all this slashing, I think we need to have some balance here. And I refuse to let anyone say that the folks on this side of the aisle do not care about every single child in this country. I'm not going to buy that. I am a father of children, and children who have come through difficult times. I represent the inner city of Baltimore, and I see children who want to be just like these wonderful young people. They want to grow up one day, and they want to achieve their dreams. But when you're talking about 1.3% being affected out of this allocation, I think that's a real problem. Instead, we need to be putting that money into the public school system, into the charter schools, into a system that is working and getting better and better every day. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
I thank the gentleman. Although I realize there will be endless comment on this, I also realize that we have 2 non-controversial bills, so I'm going to exercise the prerogative of the Chair and call up H.R. 899, a bill to amend Title 41 of the United States Code and to extend the sunset date for certain protest task and delivery order contracts, introduced by Mr. Lankford. Would the clerk read the bill?
H.R. 899, a bill to amend Title 41, United States Code to extend the sunset date for certain protests of task and deliver order contracts. Be it enacted by the House and Senate and House of Representatives of the United States of America and Congress assembled, Section 1, extension of sunset date for certain protests.
I would ask unanimous consent the bill be considered as read. And I recognize Mr. Langford to introduce his bill on our side.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thanks for placing 899 on the agenda today. I'd like to also thank the Procurement and Reform Subcommittee ranking member that serves with me, Mr. Connolly, for co-sponsoring this bill. This is a brief and technical bill. It's important to government contracting community, though, because it preserves an avenue for protest to ensure that we have fair and even-handed contracting. This is an extra layer of transparency, and it also saves a tremendous amount of money in that we don't have to go through expensive litigation to be able to resolve the issues. As many of you know, in 2008, National Defense Authorization Act gave the Government Accountability Office expanded jurisdiction to hear bid protests on task orders from both defense and civilian. They are over $10 million. This expanded jurisdiction sunsets May of 2011. That was extended for defense contractors only last December in the National Defense Authorization Act. And so that's been extended to September 30th of 2016. All this bill does is it extends it both for civilian and defense contractors and matches up that date so that they're consistent on that. So I hope we'll have support from both sides of the aisle on this. It is just a cleanup of something to be able to match up defense and civilian together. So I yield back. Thank you.
I thank the gentleman. Is any Mr. Cummings for 5 minutes?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to commend Representatives Langford and Connolly for introducing this important piece of legislation. The bill would extend GAO's authority to hear bid protests of task orders issued under civilian agency contracts for 5 years. Last year's Defense Authorization Bill made a similar extension for Defense Department contracts. This bill will ensure that a critical accountability and transparency measure will continue to be a part of our acquisition process. Task orders issued under umbrella contracts are often worth hundreds of millions of dollars and sometimes billions. They are also often awarded to multiple companies. Protests by losing competitors are a cost-effective and efficient means for the acquisition system to help regulate itself. And with that, I'll yield to Mr. Connolly.
I thank my colleague and my friend and the ranking member. I just want to commend Congressman Langford for his leadership on the subcommittee and for introducing this legislation. I probably represent more Federal contractors than any other member of Congress in the 11th District of Virginia. And I think creating an equitable playing field so that those who may have concerns about the award of civilian contracts have the same rights as those who are engaged in defense, in the defense industry, I think makes a lot of sense. It was an oversight in the past, and I again commend my colleague, Mr. Langford from Oklahoma, for catching this and for taking the leadership in this issue. And with that, I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Are there any further opening statements? Are there any amendments? I apologize. I never opened it. The bill is now open for consideration. Hold on. Yeah. The text of the bill has already been read. The clerk has already designated the bill. Does any member wish to offer an amendment? Hearing none, if there is no further discussion, I move the Committee on Oversight and Government Reform report the bill to House of Representatives with recommendation that the bill do pass. The question now is on reporting the bill favorably. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed? The ayes have it. The bill is passed. Yeah, we'll do the post office. The committee will now consider the following bill, H.R. 793, introduced by Congresswoman Lynn Woolsey of California. The clerk will report the bill.
H.R. 793, a bill to designate the facility of the United States Postal Service located at 12781 Sir Francis Drake Boulevard in Inverness, California, as a specialist, Jake Robert Velosa, Post Office.
The bill is now open. Are there any amendments? Hearing none. I ask unanimous consent that the committee favorably report H.R. 793, I'm sorry. Without objection, so ordered. Now we get to the main event. Pursuant to an agreement made before the markup, we've had 2 opening statements. We'll have 2 additional, all related to the main bill for today. With that, I recognize Mr. Gowdy for I'm sorry, he's not here yet. I recognize the gentlelady from the District of Columbia for 5 minutes.
Mr. Chairman, I'm going to have a more extensive opening statement when I introduce my amendment in the nature of a substitute, but I do want to welcome my constituents who've come and students from St. Anthony's Catholic School. I want to say to you, Mr. Chairman, that this bill was written without consultation with elected officials in the District of Columbia. Paternalism without democratic input is not appreciated, particularly in a district which has seen the majority hammer the city time and again with anti-home rule amendments. This is just another one. You're right. This will go to the floor because it is the Speaker's bill. However, it is interesting to note that once again, the majority who's at this rostrum said to my constituents, you deserve the right to a private school alternative, has not in fact put a private school bill for the nation on the floor. This isn't about improvements in education for the District of Columbia. It's about the ideological preference of the majority, beginning with the Speaker himself. Compromises were made, numerous compromises were made when this program started. It was extended not 1 but 2 years beyond the cutoff date, despite the Department of Education having found no improvement in the test scores of these children. Then a compromise for the existing program indicated that every child in the existing program could remain in the existing program. But no compromise is good enough for this majority. Now they are insisting on an entirely new voucher program only for the District of Columbia. If it is so good for the District of Columbia, why don't you give other districts the opportunity to choose private school vouchers? The reason you don't is because of referendum after referendum where the public has voted down public money for private schools. You don't dare bring such a bill to the floor, particularly when you are stripping billions of dollars from public and public charter schools. I'm going to have a bill in the nature of a substitute. I don't believe this bill will pass the Senate. This is a bill that adds to the deficit for one district. Yes, there is money for public schools and for charter schools. All of the money should go to public schools and public charter schools. Those are the schools that are accountable to the public. Private schools constitutionally cannot be accountable to the public and should not be accountable to the public. Mr. Chairman, I resent that the way in which this was done. You will find many people in the District of Columbia who say, yeah, if somebody's got some free money to pass out, pass some out to us. That doesn't make it the alternative chosen by the people of the District of Columbia. One of the reasons I resent what you're doing so much is because, as I shall indicate when I introduce my own amendment, because the District of Columbia has the most robust alternative public school system in the United States, with half of our children out of the public schools having voted with their feet to go to public charter schools with long waiting lists. But the majority tells us that what they should be doing is going to private schools of the majority's choice. Moreover, as I shall indicate in my opening statement, the D.C. public schools have made remarkable improvements. They ranked number 1 in reading and math, and we're above all of these school systems, Mr. Chairman. Number 1, the District of Columbia. 2, Boston. 3, San Diego. 4, Chicago. 5, Atlanta. 6, Houston. 7, New York City. 8, Charlotte. 9, Los Angeles. 10, Austin. 11, Cleveland.
I'd ask unanimous consent that the entire statement be placed in the record. With that, I recognize Mr. Gowdy for 5 minutes.
Was my time out, Mr. Chairman?
Yes, by 38 seconds. But I know you'll have more later.
I will, sir.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Consensus is not always easy to find in Congress, but we found it last week, Mr. Chairman. We found it in the testimonies given on the power and the magic of education. And, Mr. Chairman, I am not referring to the testimonies of the witnesses, not yet at least. I am referring to the testimonies of our very own colleagues who one by one recalled stirring emotional testimonies about the power of education in their own lives. And education is the most transformative thing that we can give another person. It's why we read to our children. It's why we support our grandchildren, because we know in education not only transforms an individual life, it can transform generations. And it is that shared acknowledgement on the power of education that makes opposition to this bill so very difficult for me to understand. The value and efficacy of this program have been proven beyond a reasonable doubt. Parents overwhelmingly approve of the Opportunity Scholarship Program. They are more engaged. They are more involved. They feel vested. They want the chance to send their children to the school of their choice, like the President does, like the Secretary of Education does, and like many of us do. Parents value the discipline and learning environment afforded by the Opportunity Scholarship Program. Students approve of the program as evidenced by the fact that demand outpaces supply 4 to 1. Student performance is up both generally and specifically, as evidenced by higher graduation rates, higher reading scores, and higher educational attainment. Even the United States Department of Education once lauded the Opportunity Scholarship Program as an example of a program that is working before someone or something told them to think otherwise. I listened yesterday, and I give a lot of credit to Secretary Duncan. He has come before the Congress on 4 different occasions, even in the 112th Congress. But all this talk about reform and looking for programs that work, and here we have a program that works by any objective standard of evaluation, and for political reasons, people want to kill it. The residents of the District of Columbia overwhelmingly support this program, and they do so, Mr. Chairman, because they know the 3-sector approach to public education in the District of Columbia works. The most insidious argument against this program is also the most inaccurate, that somehow this program takes money away from the public school system or the D.C. charter school system when people know that that is blatantly, patently false. This bill takes great care of all three sectors, ensures accountability, and allows parents that lifeline, that hope, that dream that maybe, just maybe, their child can rise from the ashes of poverty and achieve. Children like Ronald Halassi, one of the witnesses who spoke so eloquently, Mr. Chairman, before the subcommittee last week. And, Mr. Chairman, I did not know Mr. Halassi until last week, but we forged a friendship. And over the weekend, he emailed me and asked me would I be willing to write a letter of recommendation for him to one of the great schools in my own state, South Carolina State. And it is with great pride that I will do so. And we celebrate the choices that he has with respect to college, public and private. And I wonder why we don't also celebrate the choices that he would have as he prepares to go to college and high school in the District of Columbia. This bill preserves the most fundamental value of choice, and I am delighted to support it, Mr. Chairman.
Would the gentleman yield?
Yes, sir, Your Honor.
I would use this opportunity to ask unanimous consent that today's Washington Post article concerning the new Chancellor Henderson be placed in the record. Without objection, so ordered. Yield back.
Mr. Chairman, that concludes my remarks.
I thank the gentleman. We will now open the bill, H.R. 471, for consideration. Without objection, H.R. 471 will be considered as read and open to amendment at any point. Any amendments offered shall be considered as read. The clerk will designate the bill.
H.R. 471, a bill to reauthorize the D.C. Opportunity Scholarship Program and for other purposes.
Thank you. I offer an amendment in the nature of a substitute. Without objection, the amendment shall be considered original text for purposes of amendment and open to amendment at any point. The amendment in the nature of a substitute has already been distributed to each and is in each of your folders. The clerk will designate the amendment.
Amendment in the nature of a substitute to H.R. 471 offered by Mr. Issa of California.
I recognize myself to explain the amendment. This amendment makes mostly technical corrections to the legislation, but also seeks to right an injustice of 216 students in the city that I mentioned in my opening statement. As mentioned, Education Secretary Arnie Duncan rescinded 216 scholarships that were offered to new enrollees in the D.C. OSP program. These students were all looking forward to their new opportunities to attend private school and to get out of their current failing public schools. And without warning, their dreams were temporarily placed on hold by a bureaucrat. The amendment clarifies that eligible private schools offering these scholarships must give priority consideration to those 216 students. This is the right thing to do. My amendment also makes a number of improvements to the bill. First, a nationally norm-referenced standardized test will be used to ensure the best possible evaluation of the OSP students is used to determine the effectiveness of this program. Two, in addition to evaluation, will now be compared between OSP students to those who applied for a scholarship and did not receive one. This gets as close to an apples-to-apples comparison as we can get. Often it has been criticized that somehow those who apply for these scholarships are somehow special, and the rest, of course, need not apply. We believe it's not true. We believe that the difference between those who receive the scholarships and those who there is not room for is roughly the difference between success and failure because of the schools they attend. Private institutions awarding scholarships will now have to give the Secretary a detailed description of how that school will determine the amount of the scholarship provided to parents whose children are selected for the program. The amendment also specifies that those teaching core subject matters in private schools participating in OSP must either have a bachelor's degree or, if they were educated overseas, an equivalent degree. The amendment makes other minor technical changes. I encourage all my colleagues to support the amendment. Does any member wish to speak on the bill?
On the amendment.
Well, on the bill on the substitute. I recognize the gentleman from Maryland.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I understand that the amendment you are offering makes several technical changes to the introduced version of the bill, and that these do not substantively alter the core aspects of H.R. 471. I must say that I was surprised that your amendments did away with some of the bill's reporting requirements to parents. However, I am sure that you, your staff, and the Speaker's staff have a reason for modifying this particular provision, so I am not going to belabor that point. As I understand your amendment, it does not address the bill's cost concerns with an offsetting budget cut, and it fails to address the other concerns that I have mentioned previously about the bill. For these reasons, I do not have much more to say about the amendment. However, I will, when the substitute comes up, when Mrs. Norton's substitute comes up, I want to address some of the things that Mr. Gowdy said, having my mother and father having left South Carolina to get an education, for their children to get an education in Baltimore. And I'll address that at that time. I yield.
You know, I want to make certain that I understand. Mr. Gowdy said that this does not take away money from public education. I mean, could someone explain that to me?
If the gentleman would yield to me.
Certainly.
The District of Columbia is unique in that we do not have special Federal authority in the States, but in the District, this is incremental new money historically in the program. There was $75 million authorized and remains authorized. We're actually reducing it to 60. That's one of the reasons there's no offset required. This is pure Federal money, not requiring any money be taken out. Just the opposite. $20 million goes into public education, while 40 additional million go into these other programs. So the net to the public school systems of the District of Columbia is $20 million.
Reclaiming my time.
But, gentleman, yield just one more quick question. Well, then why wouldn't you give $40 million to public? I mean, you know, it affects it, because you only have a certain amount of dollars.
Reclaiming my time, may I just add something on to that, Mr. Towns, if you don't mind? Another question you might want to add on to that is, why are the Republicans zeroing out the Striving Readers Program, the high school graduated initiative, literacy through school libraries, doing substantial harm to the Head Start program? 200,000 people, young kids, unable to go into Head Start. I just want to add that on to your question, because while we hear these wonderful, wonderful things about education, and clearly I know you want to make sure that every child is educated. I do. All of us do. But the question becomes, is why are we slashing billions of dollars from education budgets?
The gentleman from Ohio.
Yeah, I would be happy to yield to the chairman.
Thank you. And in an effort to explain some of this, 2/3 of this money, which is, quite frankly, less than the $75 million authorized but not used in this current year, goes to public education. Only 1/3, only $20 million, goes to what is now a fairly long-running pilot program. Let's make it very clear. Your point that not everyone gets this opportunity. Ms. Norton said it very well. Why not everyone? Well, because this is, in fact, and continues to be, a proof of concept. This continues to be an opportunity for some and a test of whether or not we can do a better job in all the States. And as Ms. Norton said so rightly, we cannot make these decisions for all the States. But in the District of Columbia, since 2004, these scholarships, we believe, have proven positive. Now, there are those in your party who chose to be part of canceling this program. We believe strongly enough that this has merit. The technical corrections were designed to quantify the merit for those few but important students that have this opportunity. We have no doubt that public education and non-public education will occur in the States at State expense. This is but $20 million into tens of billions of dollars the Federal Government will supply to States and the District of Columbia to help with education. The truth is, we cannot finance education at the Federal level. No one expects us to. We do believe very strongly, and I believe that this is a measured bill where two-thirds of it goes to additional money to help the District of Columbia, money that is not an entitlement, but money which is a choice of the Republicans, and but one-third, but $20 million, goes to these opportunity scholarships. Yes, there is a difference between our two parties. The difference between our two parties appears to be that your side wants everything to go to public schools, even if they're failing. Well, we would like to see if there isn't a better way. And I'd like to just take the gentleman's continued indulgence for yielding to make one point to the gentlelady from the District of Columbia. You mentioned the Constitution, and you mentioned we people. Well, I'm not the author of this bill, but I do support the bill, so I'll accept that. But nowhere in the Constitution is education a Federal responsibility. Nowhere is there a constitutional right for Federal dollars. Not even in the District of Columbia is there a constitutional right for Federal dollars. We feel strongly that the States and the District must raise the money to educate their children, and they do. We also feel strongly, since the intent of No Child Left Behind and other initiatives in the previous administration, that we should be an honest broker, an honest evaluator, an honest sayer of what's working and not working. Public schools in America do not all fail. Public schools in America succeed. But in the District of Columbia, one of the places with the greatest cost per student, it does not do that well. And earlier I had a unanimous consent to include this, but I will read quickly from today's Washington Post, where it says, nevertheless, a huge problem remains. Far too, and this is a quote, far too many students can't read or do math at grade level, and far too many drop out before graduating. You and I share an interest in improving public and all education in the District. The reason that chartered public schools exist is because there was a desire to create competition within the public system. The reason that these students are here today from St. Anthony's in Ward 5, these 8th graders, is because it's important enough to their education to be here to look at how our democratic system of government works, how our republic debates issues. That's something that I feel very strongly is a good part of the education they're receiving. So we're going to disagree because we do have a different viewpoint between our party and your party at times. But it's not that we disagree on whether to help kids. We all want to do that. It's not that we fail to agree that public education is critical, and it is the backbone of educating the vast majority of students in this country, including myself, who went K through part of 12 in the public system before going in the Army. It is, though, about this pilot program that we truly believe, at least most of us, if not all of us on this side of the aisle, is an opportunity to see if it can be done better and to help children have that kind of competition.
Will the gentleman yield?
His time has expired. I yield back. Does anyone seek recognition?
Mr. Chairman.
Take time.
Yes, of course.
May I have the time?
The gentlelady from the District of Columbia is recognized.
I appreciate the Chairman's remarks. I hope the Chairman understands that he's looking at a member who has long been for alternatives to public schools, who's never been an apologist for the D.C. public schools. I'm a proud graduate of the D.C. public schools. I got to go to any school in the United States I wanted to from the D.C. public schools. That is not the case for children today. I shall never believe that a child gets to go to first grade more than once. I hope that my constituents understand that democracy means that you don't indeed, you don't enact for another member's district without even consulting that member. I hope they understand that when my good friend Mr. Gowdy says there was consensus last week that this committee saw to it that the mayor of the District of Columbia could not even testify because they knew he opposed the bill. Mr. Chairman, may I correct your notion about authorization for this bill. There is no offset. The authorization for this bill ran out. That is why you are here seeking an authorization. There was never an authorization for the other two sectors. That was done by the Appropriations Committee, and I will give credit to why it was done. When you first sought to impose vouchers on the District of Columbia, I asked that that money go to the district's alternative schools and to public schools. The bishop at the time listened to us and understood that for money to come from the Federal Government only for the private schools would be wrong. And so he said, I will not accept the money unless there is also money for the D.C. public and public charter schools. The bishop is a real Christian, and I will never forget that he reinforced our call for what amounted to the three-sector, but you have no leftover funds. You have no authorization in this bill, and you are violating the protocols by not providing an offset for a new authorization, and you should know it.
Would the gentlelady yield?
I yield.
My able staff is explaining to me, hopefully for all of us, that the appropriators did appropriate $75 million for this program, which ran through 2009, and the funds, if you will, intended to be used, and we will ensure that when this comes to the floor, those funds are available or that there's an offset. The funds available are $75 million, of which we're using $60 million to reauthorize this bill, which ran.
Where do you get the $75 million from, Mr. Chairman?
Well, it turns out the appropriators continued to appropriate the money, 2010 appropriation. So those are the funds on which this bill relies. If those funds are not available, you have my assurance I will ensure that there's an offset or this bill would not go forward.
Under your own protocols, and I'm sure you'll be able to find an offset.
Well, we believe very strongly in this, so I suspect we will. Is the gentlelady yield back?
I thank the gentleman. I yield back.
Well, this will come as a surprise to you, ma'am, but does any member wish to offer an amendment to the amendment in the nature of a substitute?
Mr. Chairman, I have
the gentlelady from the District of Columbia is recognized.
Mr. Chairman, as I said, I do not believe this bill will, in fact, get through the Senate. It is a priority of the Speaker. That's why it's getting through here post haste.
Would the gentlelady yield? The clerk will read the amendment.
Amendment in the nature of a substitute to H.R. 471, offered by Ms. Norton of District of Columbia. Strike all after the enacting clause and insert the following. Section 1, short title, this act may be cited as the Public Funds for Public Education Act. Section 2, funding for D.C. public schools and D.C.
Without objection, the amendment shall be considered as read, and the gentlelady is recognized for 5 minutes to explain her amendment.
Mr. Chairman, when this bill was originally imposed, I met with some of my voucher parents and asked them, well, why weren't they going to the public charter schools if they wanted alternatives? And they said, Congresswoman, we tried to get in the charter schools, but they have such long waiting lists, we couldn't get in. So my amendment in the nature of a substitute, the Public Funds for Public Education Act, would authorize $60 million over 5 years to improve public education in the District of Columbia. The amendment gives $30 million to the D.C. public schools to enable it to build on its recent progress, and $30 million to improve and expand our flourishing home rule alternative, the D.C. public charter schools. My amendment would also provide priority to attend D.C. public charter schools for the 216 students awarded scholarships that were later rescinded in the 2009-10 school year. Those students were taken in after the cutoff date of the program and have been used as poster children for yet a new program. Well, I would like those children to be given priority to go to public charter schools. The findings in Chairman Iss's amendment in the nature of a substitute try to justify this new voucher startup on the ground that D.C. public school students are outperformed by every state in the nation. While I'm always happy to hear my Republican colleagues classify the district as a state, and the fact is we're treated as a state for every purpose except the vote on the House floor, But in the case of public education, for the sake of accuracy, the district should be classified as the National Assessment of Educational Progress does, and should be given credit for major improvement in its public schools that has been nationally acknowledged. The 2009 National Assessment of Education Progress, known as the Nation's Report Card, found that the D.C. public schools were the only district out of the nation's 18 largest urban school districts to experience major growth at both the 4th and 8th grade levels in math and reading from 2007 to 2009. Considering continuing deficiencies in the public schools of the district, however, I have always been a strong supporter of public charter school alternatives, which educate almost half our students. And that is not because anyone has imposed those schools on them. That's what the parents have chosen for their students, for their children. The Department of Education final report on the D.C. voucher program found, and I am here quoting, no conclusive evidence that the Opportunity Scholarship Program affected student achievement as measured by standardized reading and math tests, end quote. However, D.C. public middle and high schools scored almost twice as high as their D.C. public school counterparts in math and reading, and the graduation rates of charter schools is 24% higher than the graduation rate of public high schools and 8% higher than the nationwide average. And understand what the public charter schools are. They have significantly more African American students than the D.C. public schools, and they have significantly more disadvantaged students than the D.C. public schools, which are more integrated than our charter schools. These results are why so many of our public charter schools have long waiting lists. My amendment will enroll many more D.C. students, will allow many more D.C. students to enroll in the district's own home rule alternative, which our parents have chosen and made long waiting lists for, the public charter schools, rather than a congressionally mandated program. The Department of Education's report brings to light another problem with continuing the Opportunity Scholarship Program, besides the fact that it did not meet the test of improving scores. This private school voucher program was designed to prioritize those children from the lowest performing schools and lowest income levels. However, the Department of Education's report shows that the only students showing even minimal improvements are not the students targeted by the Act. The Act allows some students who were not from the lowest performing schools, and those are the students that are showcased time and again. While certain student groups, quote, appeared to have higher levels of reading and achievement, those findings
I'd ask unanimous consent the gentlelady have one additional minute.
I appreciate the Chairman's addition. I'm almost through. The report found that even those students, those findings could be, quote, due to chance. D.C. public and charter schools already have a significantly high number of economically disadvantaged children and of African American children mentioned in the Act, who could desperately use any extra public funds that the Congress has to dispose of. I urge my colleagues to stand up for the schools chosen by our own parents, our public schools, which have improved markedly, and the alternative, our public charter schools. If you believe in democracy, then the best democratic choice is the choice the parents have chosen, and they have chosen a different model. They have chosen our own alternative schools, and I am proud of the choices they have made and proud of our alternative charter schools. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I thank the gentlelady. I now recognize myself in opposition to the gentlelady's amendment. This amendment essentially negates the program. I know the gentlelady doesn't believe in this program. I know the gentlelady does believe in taking as much money as the Federal Government will give to the District of Columbia, as well you should as its representative. However, we have a three-tiered system in the District of Columbia. We have conventional public schools, which receive full funding. We have chartered public schools, which, although they have a waiting list, get less than their fair share of funding by their own statements, something that I find really, really sad, that within public schools, the preferred, the long waiting list public schools, the chartered public schools find themselves getting less than equal funding with the schools that, quite frankly, parents are leaving. If full funding and full expansion of those schools under home rule were allowed to flourish, public schools as we know it would be closing. Chartered public schools would be opening in those buildings. There would be a renaissance in the District of Columbia. I don't represent the District of Columbia. Our committee does oversee it, and we take home rule seriously. But we do have to, quite frankly, as this pilot program continues forward, we do have to wonder why it is, if you care so much about kids, if chartered public schools are working well, why they are both underfunded and restrained from their natural growth. Notwithstanding that, we do give $40 million, 20 to conventional public schools, $20 million to these chartered public schools that do have long waiting lines, and a mere $20 million out of billions of dollars that are spread around the United States from Federal dollars will go to these opportunity scholarships. I might note that since this program came into effect, public schools and chartered public schools have received $260 million for school improvements. Certainly, this committee has cared about all the schools in the District of Columbia, has fought to provide additional funding to an area of the country that has often not been the highest performer. I take great pride in my predecessor's work on a bipartisan basis with the gentlelady to create opportunity scholarships and to try to create additional funding wherever possible for the District of Columbia. I want to make something very clear in opposing the gentlelady's amendment. If there was more money, I would put more money into all these programs. If there was a proposal to expand chartered public schools, I would be all for it. I want the District of Columbia to come here with its new chancellor and make the same type of proposals and aggressive directional changes that will help all the students. The students that are here today that are recipients of these opportunity scholarships are the lucky ones. They are the ones, if you will, that won the great lottery of life. I'd like every student in the District of Columbia to have the opportunity to win the lottery of life. In my home state of California, we do have chartered public schools, and they are successful, and they are popular, and they do change the rules that often exist in other public schools. My state has voted down vouchers, but my state did not have a Federal handout for vouchers. Our state was simply looking at taking some of the money that goes to public schools and moving it to vouchers. There is an opportunity here that is different. This is money that would not otherwise be available. This money would not be going to the District of Columbia were it not for the opportunity to use the district to its highest and best use, which is, in fact, the 51st place for America to look at how business is done. Home rule, with the assistance of our Federal oversight, is, in fact, an opportunity to have one more laboratory for the education, city management, public transportation, and all the other things that go on in the other states. We do so hand in hand with the Mayor. I will tell you, I regret the Mayor not appearing before that committee. However, the decision was the Mayor's. The Mayor chose not to be on a panel that we believed was very appropriate. This committee will not routinely simply have people on panels of one because they want to be on a panel of one. That wasn't done under Democratic leadership. I don't believe it should be done under Republican leadership. I look forward to working with my members on both sides of the dais here to come up with good makeup for the dais that is efficient for all the members. I look forward to inviting the Mayor back. And on the appropriate issues and appropriate time, we would be more than happy to have the mayor back to give a vision, or the mayor and the new Chancellor of Education back to give their vision. I welcome that and yield back. Does anyone else seek recognition?
I do.
The ranking member is
I
recognized.
yield with 1 minute of my 5 to the gentlelady from the District of Columbia. Mr. Norton.
Thank you very much. I want to correct the notion. The mayor never asked to be on a panel by himself. The mayor only asked to be heard so that he could leave and attend to urgent business. He's in the middle of his budget cycle. He made 2 different proposals. Both were denied. He never objected to being on a panel. He was told that the most you can do is to be on a panel, and we won't even tell you whether you would be first or not. As for the D.C. public, as for the underfunding of our charter schools, you're absolutely right. And I very much regret that, but it's for the same reason that schools all around the country will not have enough funds this year, because this House is in fact cutting billions of dollars, and the effect is less funding for the facilities part of the charter schools, not the per capita part of the charter schools. And I thank the gentleman for
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Let me be clear. And you know, the thing that bothers me so much about this discussion is that there's an undertone which seems to imply that the folks on this side don't care about these kids in this audience, and that I resent. Mr. Gowdy spoke a little bit earlier, and my mother and father came from South Carolina as young teenagers who had just gotten married. They left South Carolina, Mr. Chairman, in the 1940s for one sole reason, because they could not get an education. They thought their kids would not be able to get an education. They came to Baltimore after their 7 children, and then their 7 children were born. And they were able to educate all 7 of us on a domestic salary and a laborer salary. So education is key. And I do appreciate the fact that Mr. Gowdy is writing a letter of recommendation for the young man. Well, Mr. Gowdy, let me be clear. On this side of the aisle, and I'm sure on your side of the aisle, we write a whole lot of letters of recommendation, help kids, fight for kids to get into colleges, fight for them to have an opportunity to even get out of high school. That's why we're so concerned about things like Head Start. We realize that so many kids don't even get a decent start to even get to this point where these beautiful, awesome children are today. And so, you know, when we're talking about, Mr. Chairman, winning the lottery of life, lotteries are fine, but, you know, if I'm going to put my money on something, I guess I want to put my money on something that is definitely working like the charter schools. It seems as if, I mean, if we want to put that money, and I understand what you're saying is not coming from, this is some extra federal money, I guess, that you want to put in the District of Columbia. And I guess the issue of home rule does become very significant. I don't know how many of us go into our school districts and tell them what to do. I don't think we do. But I was just at a town hall meeting in my district on Saturday, and the lady who coordinates the Head Start program got up, and she literally, with tears in her eyes, and she said, I've got 200 kids in Head Start today, but guess what, Congressman? There are 725 on the waiting list. And so that's sad, because a lot of those kids will never get the Head Start that they desperately need. And I often tell my constituents, I speak for the living, but I also speak for the dead. There's so many people in the community that I live in. I want to be clear. I don't live in the suburbs. I live in the inner city of Baltimore, in the inner city. And I see the young people who don't get the educations, the ones who don't get the opportunities, and you know where they're sitting? They're sitting in prisons. That's where they're sitting. Many of them are dead. That's where they are. Many of them are drugged up. That's where they are. And that's why I want to make it clear. We have no problem with making sure that every single child is educated. I've said it in speeches over and over again. I am concerned about Osama bin Laden. I am concerned about terrorists. But the greatest threat to our national security is the failure to properly educate every single one of our children. Every single one of them. We can't just leave people out. They come with gifts. And if we don't help them, it's their turn. It is their turn. If we don't help to nurture, first of all, help them discover what their gifts are, and then nurture those gifts so that they can be all that God meant for them to be, shame on us. That's what the discussion, and I refuse to let anybody even imply that I or these members do not care about every single child getting a decent education so that they can be all that God meant for them to be. With that, I yield back.
I thank the gentleman. With that, I recognize the gentleman from Ohio, I believe, asked to be recognized first. Mr. Jordan.
I thank the Chairman. I was just going to kind of relate what happened in Ohio last decade in our expansion of school choice for students. And I appreciate the ranking member's passion. I think everyone has passion for kids getting a quality education. You can't experience the American dream if you don't have that great education. And frankly, the passion I see from the ranking member is the same passion I saw from parents. Every time the courts were set to shut down the scholarship program in Ohio, I saw these moms on a mission, come and talk about what it meant for their son or daughter to be in this scholarship program. When we started this program in the General Assembly in Ohio, just get these numbers. Cleveland Public Schools at the time had a 32% graduation rate. Today it has a 34% graduation rate. We said in the initial program, K through first grade, we would take 2,000 students, give them a scholarship worth $2,250. 2,000 students getting $2,250 when Cleveland Public Schools was spending at the time over $6,000, this is 1995, over $6,000 on a kid's education. On the initial sign-up day, 2,000 spots, K through second grade, 7,000 parents were kicking and fighting and scratching to get to the front of that line to get that scholarship. And think about what these parents were saying. We will forego the additional money spent on our kids in the Cleveland Public Schools. Give us that scholarship. We will forego having $4,000 additional dollars spent on our son or daughter. Give us the scholarship and the ability to escape and get to a better education. They understood how powerful, that is a powerful message. We will forego the money, give us the chance to escape, and put our son or daughter in a school where we think they're going to get what they need to experience the American dream that the ranking member so eloquently talked about. That is what this is all about. And this was challenged in court, went all the way to the Supreme Court, challenged on the Establishment Clause in the First Amendment, went all the way up and was found constitutional. And the argument I always make is, how bad does it have to get before we allow kids the opportunity to escape and get to a better education? The gentlelady from D.C. talked about we want this for everyone. I agree. I would love to have a system that says, let's have a child-centered system, one where the dollars are strapped to the back of the kid, and that wherever the mom and dad of that young boy or that girl thinks they're going to get the best education, let the dollars follow the kid. That is a model that is consistent with American principles, one that empowers families, empowers individuals, allows them to make the choice, allows them to have the freedom to do what's best. Every single time, in my time in the General Assembly, every single time we expanded choice for families, it was opposed by the establishment. First, it was vocational school. Oh, we can't have vocational schools. Turned out to be a good thing. Then it was open enrollment. Oh, we can't have open enrollment. That's a bad. Turned out to be a good thing. Then it was post-secondary option, allowing kids in their junior and senior year to go to a local university, get college credits. That was a bad thing. Turned out to be a good thing. Then it was homeschooling. Then it was charter schools. And then it was ultimately school choice opportunity scholarships. Every single time it was opposed initially by the establishment, every single time it turned out to be a positive thing for the families who got the ability to send their son or daughter to a school that mattered and one where they knew they were going to get a quality education. That's what this legislation is about. Let's not make it, it's about allowing families the ability to make the decision. I learned a long time ago, even though some families make poor decisions, in the vast majority of cases, families, parents make infinitely better decisions than bureaucrats and politicians can ever make. That's what this program is about, and that's why we should pass the bill and oppose the amendment. I yield back.
I thank the gentleman. The distinguished former chairman of the committee, Mr. Towns.
Thank you very much. And let me just yield 1 minute to the gentlelady from Washington, D.C.
The gentleman's passion for the program is interesting. My friend who just spoke, in light of the fact that this program is not being made available all over the country, not being available in Ohio and Michigan and yes, not being available in California. And the reason is that this is the attempt, as the chairman said, to use the district as a laboratory. One thing that really raises the hackles of the residents of the District of Columbia, full citizens of the United States, is to be told we are the congressional laboratory. We are just as much of an independent, self-governing district as yours, and expect to be treated that way. We are not your lab rats. If you want some lab rats, put a bill on the floor and let whatever district wants to be your lab rats come forward. Don't choose us for what we are not. We demand to be treated as full American citizens, not as your laboratory for your ideological preferences. I yield back to the gentleman.
Let me just say that I'm troubled. And let me tell you why I'm troubled. You know, I don't think anybody knows more about your district than you do. If they did, they would be here representing. And that's my concern here. You have the gentlewoman from Washington, D.C., who represents the area, is saying this is not the way to go, and we are going to ignore it. You know, that's my problem even with earmarks. I know that's a dirty word around here, but I'm telling you now, and you can mark my word, we're going to waste more money by not having earmarks than we would if we had them. Because you're going to have secretaries making the decisions as to what should happen in your district, and you walk the streets of your district every week. And they can't know as much about the needs of your district as you do. And for us to sit here this morning and argue with the point that the gentlewoman from Washington, D.C., who represents the over 600,000 people in the district, and to say that this is what you need, open your mouth and take it, that to me is wrong. And I think that we need to recognize it, and if we want to waste money, this is a good way to do it. But I think that people that represent the area should have the opportunity to determine what happens in their area. And of course, I recognize there's a thing called individual differences. I recognize it, and I understand some people learn faster than others. I recognize that. My son, who serves in the legislature, says it so well. He said, Dad, sometimes it takes some people 2.5 hours to watch 60 Minutes. It doesn't mean they can't watch it, but it takes them longer. She knows what her district needs, and we should recognize it, respect it, and move with that in mind. On that note,
would the gentleman yield?
I'd be delighted to yield to the chairman.
You've seen me with my TiVo watching 60 Minutes, I guess. I appreciate that, and I do share your concern for local control. But as you know, 75% of the district's residents support the continuation of this program, and it was a near tie election for mayor that really made the difference between a mayor who totally supported it, a chancellor who supported it, and now a change in administration who seems to be bending the other way. But I appreciate the gentleman yield and yield back.
Yeah, but what do we think about the person that represents the district, that sits here with us, walks the streets of Washington, D.C., not like we do once a week. She walks the streets every day. So it seems to me that that's the opinion that we should truly respect. And that's what I'm doing. I'm respecting the opinion of the person that represents the area. And I think that we all should do just that. And I'll be honest with you. If there was something that specifically represent or worked in your district, I would respect that and respect you for offering whatever it is. And I think we should do the same to the Congresswoman.
Would the gentleman yield?
I would be delighted to yield further.
You know, I regard my appointments to the academies as crucial, and I make them carefully. I have a whole board, and I meet with every candidate. But when the President offers a scholarship, or the Commandant or any of the other people who have selected ability to offer scholarships to the academies, I don't complain when one more person gets in the academy than I appointed. To a great extent, this program is about opportunities beyond that which are already available through whatever the gentlelady can do in the District of Columbia. We're not asking anyone to give up anything. This is incremental additional for that 75% or the kids of that 75% who want those opportunity scholarships. And I thank the gentleman for yielding.
She's not saying that she's not for private schools. She's not saying that.
Is there anyone else who seeks recognition? Okay, Mr. Langford, who I think has been here longer, I'll go to him, and then to Mr. Conley.
I appreciate all the conversation on it, and I appreciate getting a chance to see these 8th graders. It makes me homesick. I have an 8th grade daughter at home, and so it's nice to get a chance to see some other students that are here. I attended growing up both private and public schools, though my mom was a public school educator. There was a season in my life where she chose, on even a public school teacher's salary as a single parent, to make the sacrifices to be able to do that, and it was a tremendous sacrifice for my family. It does amaze me somewhat that we're spending so much time arguing about adding $60 million into educating students into D.C., $40 million of that being in the public schools, both through the charter schools and through the regular D.C. schools, and another $20 million into educating additional children. It is an interesting argument to me to say if we're going to dump more money into the D.C. schools, then we should do it all for just public and charter schools, because that will affect more students, and that will allow us to be able to have more students involved rather than a select few, when in reality our scholarships we're talking about are between $8,000 and $12,000 per person. When you go to the D.C. public schools, it's $17,000 per person to do that. So this does affect more students, given more opportunity. It does add $40 million into the district for public school education. So this just seems like an odd argument to say we don't want the other $40 million in case $20 million will go to some private schools. We don't want those kids to have the option, so we'll turn down the $40 million over here or try to change it on this. And believe me, I grew up in both public and private schools. I'm a big believer in both, big believer in education line. But to give the opportunity to say, let's drop in $20 million and give a greater value to that group of students than what we're receiving in the public school education, I think it's a good experiment for us to be able to do and to be able to engage with that. So with that, I yield back.
I thank the gentleman. Mr. Connolly.
Thank you,
5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I want to thank you for inviting these students from St. Anthony's School. I am a graduate of St. Anthony's School in Boston, where my 8th grade nun once warned me that all I needed was a platform and I could be a politician. So I listened to that 8th grade nun.
Can you go back for a second opinion?
But there was a big difference, I guess, when my parents chose to put myself and my sibling in parochial school, and that was we didn't expect a voucher. We didn't expect public money to subsidize our choice in education. And I respect and admire my friend from Oklahoma, and I understand what he's saying, but I wonder how Oklahoma would feel, how Oklahoma City would feel, if this Congress imposed on it a decision about how money with respect to education should be spent. That's really the issue here. Mrs. Norton's amendment does not turn back the money. It would divert the money to the public school system. What I find troubling in this discussion is the paternalism of those who otherwise profess a deep commitment to federalism. And presumably this is all about we want to impose the ability of parents in D.C. to have a choice. If we're going to be consistent, the same people who say they are committed to that principle had no trouble, however, stripping choice, the voting choice, of the elected delegate of the people of the District of Columbia. That was one of the first things this new majority did. She can no longer vote in the Committee of the Whole. And they certainly don't support voting rights for the District of Columbia. The same crowd that says it's committed to the education of these children had no trouble a few weeks ago stripping $1.2 billion in funding for Head Start. Where was the commitment to children and education then? What this is really about is a power struggle. It's about undermining public education. And as Wisconsin has shown, it's about trying to take on public unions, including teachers' unions. And it's about the paternalism of deciding what's best for the people of the District of Columbia and denying them, in fact, the choice. Their elected leadership has a different point of view. It hasn't been heard, but their elected leadership has a different point of view. It is wrong of this Congress, it is wrong of this committee to substitute itself for the school board and the elected leadership of the District of Columbia, however misguided we may feel they may be. I ran as the chairman of Fairfax County, just across the river, the 11th largest school system in the United States of America, 170,000 students. We didn't divert resources for vouchers. We invested and poured more money into public education, which may be why we have one of the highest performing public education systems in the United States. The answer for failing schools isn't to abandon them. It is to reinvest in them. It is to shore them up. And if the District of Columbia wants to do that, I'm going to support it. With that, Mr. Chairman, I yield the balance of my time to the gentlelady from the District of Columbia.
I thank my friend for yielding. I think it is important that he's made the point that my amendment does not give the money back. It reallocates the money to where the district parents have shown they want the money to go to. And with all due respect, Mr. Chairman, about a tie election, the election was by no means a tie election, and my election certainly was not a tie election. I have consistently been the top vote-getter in the District of Columbia. I have to stand for election. I hope that my parents will judge me by more than my disagreement with them on this matter, and they have consistently done that. Mr. Chairman, you said that the school system spends $17,000. According to the CRS, the district public school system per student is $8,770.
The gentleman be advised you have to remain while yielding time.
Excuse me?
Just 23 more seconds, please. Continue, ma'am.
It is $8,770. I want to make it clear. If you have money, the money should go to where district parents have shown they want it to go, and that is to our D.C. public schools and our own alternative. And I challenge anybody in this room on either side to have an alternative school system as robust and as large as the alternative school system our own public charter schools are of the District of Columbia. Yet, let those of you who are without sin cast the first stone on alternatives.
On that note, we recognize the gentleman from Ohio, Mr. Turner.
Wow, this has certainly been a highly charged debate over a basic issue of whether or not scholarships can be provided to students so that they cannot be limited by their geography and they can seek whatever opportunity may be available to them. Now, I have to tell you, there have been a lot of people on the other side of the aisle who I have listened to, and I'm deeply offended by the manner in which you approach this. First off, I want you to know I did not have one grandparent that spent one day in high school. I did not have one grandparent that spent one day in high school. My father did not graduate from high school until I did at 18. He said in my family, I will not be the only person who has not graduated from high school. He went back to adult night school, not a GED program, and he graduated from high school at 18. When I was 18, he was 48. I went to an inner-city high school where there were 2,700 kids, very few in college prep, completed high school, went on to college, and I can tell you that in the inner city today, even when I was in the inner city and now, there are futures of children being stolen, and they're being stolen because they don't have the opportunity. When I got to college, I was not prepared. If I had not had a professor who pulled me aside and said, in high school you missed a lot, let me see if I can help you, I would not have gotten my law degree, I wouldn't have got my MBA, I wouldn't have gotten my undergraduate degree, and I don't think I'd be sitting here. But somebody who stepped up and said, the education that you got was inferior, and I'll help you bridge the gap, made the difference for me. These kids every day go to school willing to learn and in a system that is failing. Nobody here would debate that this system is working. And no one is debating that when these kids show up that they have every capability and every opportunity in front of them, only the system steals it. This scholarship opportunity gives an ability for kids to step out of the limitation of their geography and pursue unlimited opportunity so that they can sit here, so that the gentlelady from the District of Columbia could actually have a student who was in an inner-city program and went through a scholarship and got a great education, an education that could bring them right here to represent the District of Columbia. This is sad because this is not about are we undermining education, as I've heard? This is not about, trying to usurp the authority. This is about control. Those who don't want this to pass want government to control the future of these children and give them a system that is failing, period. There is no other alternative that's here to give them a system that is working. The scholarships give these children the only opportunity they have, which is from day one, opt out and now pursue an education that hopefully can make them reach their wonderful and great potential. Let's stop the rhetoric and stop that this is about control. I believe that these parents, not the gentle lady from the District of Columbia, should have the ability to decide. And if the District of Columbia doesn't want this, then I bet these scholarships will go unapplied for, right? Every one of these scholarships will sit there with no parent who raises their hand and say, give my child an opportunity if these are the wrong things to do. If the District of Columbia believes these are the wrong things to do, they will not be spent. But they will be. And they will be, because there are parents every day who come home and meet with their kids when their kids come home and say, I wish I could give you a better opportunity. I wish I'd get you a better education. I wish you could reach the full potential that you can have. And this is a program that will help that. I yield back.
I thank the gentleman. The gentleman from Missouri is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate the opportunity for this hearing. I move to strike the last word.
The gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And we should all be focused on achievement. We should all be. It should all be about comparing the achievement results of these young people that are whether they're in D.C. public schools or whether they are in a charter school or in a private school. And if the results bear that out, then we should be supportive of whatever program helps these young people. And with that, I'd like to strongly support the gentlewoman's amendment and yield the balance of my time to the gentleman from Maryland.
Thank you very much for the gentleman for yielding. I just wanted to speak just very briefly. I won't even use the entire 4 minutes, Mr. Chairman. But to the last gentleman that spoke on the Republican side, we are not in total disagreement. But one of the things that is very interesting is that while this program is very important for these children, the question becomes is what happens when they get ready to go to college. And guess what? A TRIO program that helps kids get into college, like the ones that are sitting in front of you, $25 million cut by the Republicans. Pell Grants, $800 less for the maximum that these same children will be able to get. That's right, $800. $800 a year that could pay for books, that could pay for food, that could help pay for tuition. 8 times 4, the 4 years an average kid is in school, now they say it's 5, but 4 for my kids, it's $3,200. That's a lot of money, slash. Gear Up program, slash. Head Start, and I get going back to Head Start because Head Start is so very, very important because so many kids come to school, unfortunately, not ready to learn. And so we want to make sure that these kids have an opportunity to get to where these young people are. One of the teachers in my district often says by the time a child gets to 3rd grade, they should have learned to read. And then after the 3rd grade, they read to learn. She goes on to say that if a child does not learn to read by the end of the 3rd grade, they are like standing in the middle of a busy highway waiting for somebody blind, a blind person standing in the middle of a busy highway waiting for someone to lead them across. And so, we've got to make sure that we have some consistency here. If you care about every one of these beautiful, awesome children who could grow up to be President of the United States, the ones that you're looking at, it might be helpful when, to take a look at programs like the Pell Grants, the Gear Up program, TRIO, and Head Start. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
I thank the gentleman. Chair now recognizes the gentleman from Pennsylvania, Mr. Platts. to strike the last word.
Yep. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Certainly appreciate the perspectives of all on this issue, and I think we all share the same goal, which is helping children. I think the one difference is for those who are supporting the legislation and those who are opposing is whether we're going to be focused on helping every child or some children. And so I don't support the legislation that we're moving forward here today, and it's because I think as a Congress we're shirking our responsibility. Because as is stated in the background material in the bill, Congress has this authority over the District of Columbia. And our responsibility is to make sure each and every child gets a good education, not select ones. And I would contend that those who would get a scholarship and leave may get a better education. They may get to a school that provides them a better opportunity, and I respect that. But my concern is, what did we do to help the overwhelming number of children that are left behind? And it's not about money. I'm not focused on money. It's about what we took out of those public schools, because schools are not teachers and principals. They're teachers and principals and students and parents and concerned taxpayers, the citizens of the community. When you take a child out of a public school because they got a scholarship, that child and that family clearly cares about the education of their children. Those are the type of families we need in those public schools to make them better. And when you take that child out, that mom on a mission, which I think is great, you take out the type of parents we want in there helping to fix the schools, to be part of that partnership. So I would contend we worsen the school that's left behind, the kids that are left behind. So we may help some, but I think we harm even more.
Gentleman yield.
And so I'll be glad to in a minute. So I think that as a Congress, we need to decide. If we really decide that we want to be in charge of the public school system at D.C. or any public school in the country, because we're funding them all, not just D.C., then we need to be serious about that. And it's not just throwing some money at a small group to say, you know what, we give up on fixing the whole system. We give up on helping each and every child. And instead, we're going to help those who can get out, who have a parent who's engaged and involved to get a scholarship and to get out. We're going to help you, and we're giving up on the rest. I think our focus should be on fixing it for all. And you know, because of the issue of local control, I'm not sure that, you know, the role of Congress, because as was well stated in a number of people, you know, is Congress going to go in and tell every individual school district what they should or shouldn't do? You know, we've always respected that's a state and local decision. But if we're going to do it, it needs to be representative of every child. I'll yield to the Chairman first.
Just briefly, wouldn't the gentleman agree that the administration provides grants to, for example, free clinics and other health outreach organizations and homeless shelters, but doesn't provide all of them? Wouldn't that be another example where the Federal Government picks some, not all, provides very often to private groups like St. Vincent de Paul in my home of San Diego, and yet it doesn't do all, but it doesn't destroy hospitals simply because we help some clinics with Federal money, does it?
I would distinguish the analogy to a health clinic from the access to a quality education in a secure environment. To me, there is a difference. To me, the land of opportunity, the reason we're the land of opportunity is every child, as my good friend and colleague, Mr. Turner, talked about, having access to an education that will allow them to advance themselves. And this scholarship program, I'm not arguing that it may help some get a better education. What I'm arguing is that we need to care about every child. And I think we harm the children left behind by taking these families out of those schools. We should partner with those families and fix the school, not abandon the school as a body. And with that, my last 40 seconds, I'm still glad to yield to the gentleman.
I appreciate the gentleman yield. I would just make 2 points, and I said this earlier. First, an empowerment model is one that puts the money in the control of the family, straps the money to the back of that child, and they decide that is a model that applies equally to every single kid. Second, I would make this point, and I think this is important, and I would ask the gentleman a question, and for those who oppose us to think about it. How bad does it have to get before you let some escape? I mean, in Cleveland, for example, is a 32% graduation rate. Does it have to be a 15% graduation? Do we have to wait till not one single kid graduates from a public school until we let some go to some other school where they're going to get an education?
Reclaiming my time quickly. No, what I'm saying is we shouldn't let it get bad. We should fix it instead of abandoning it. Yield back.
The question is on agreeing to the amendment offered by Ms. Norton. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. In the opinion of the Chair, as the noes have it, the gentleman requests a roll call vote. The clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Issa?
No.
Mr. Issa votes no. Mr. Burton? Mr. Burton votes no. Mr. Mica? Mr. Platts? Mr. Platts votes yes. Mr. Turner? Mr. Turner votes no. Mr. McHenry? Mr. McHenry votes no. Mr. Jordan? Mr. Jordan votes no. Mr. Chaffetz? Mr. Chaffetz votes no. Mr. Mack? Mr. Mack votes no. Mr. Walberg? Mr. Walberg votes no. Mr. Langford? Mr. Langford votes no. Mr. Amash? Mr. Amash votes no. Ms. Burkle? Ms. Burkle votes no. Dr. Gosar? Dr. Gosar votes no. Mr. Labrador? Mr. Labrador votes no. Mr. Meehan? Mr. Meehan votes no. Dr. Desjarlais? Dr. Desjarlais votes no. Mr. Walsh? Mr. Walsh votes no. Mr. Gowdy? Mr. Gowdy votes no. Mr. Ross? Mr. Ross votes no. Mr. Ginta? Mr. Ginta votes no. Mr. Farenthold? Mr. Farenthold votes no. Mr. Kelly? Mr. Kelly votes no. Mr. Cummings? Mr. Cummings votes aye. Mr. Towns? Mrs. Maloney? Mrs. Maloney votes aye. Ms. Norton? Ms. Norton votes aye. Mr. Kucinich? Mr. Tierney?
Aye.
Mr. Tierney votes aye. Mr. Clay? Mr. Clay votes aye. Mr. Lynch? Mr. Cooper? Mr. Connolly?
No.
Mr. Connolly votes no.
Or are we voting on? I'm voting aye.
Mr. Connolly votes aye. Mr. Quigley? Mr. Davis? Mr. Braley? Mr. Braley votes aye. Mr. Welch? Mr. Welch votes aye. Mr. Yarmouth? Mr. Murphy? Mr. Murphy votes aye. Ms. Spear?
Mr. Towns, yeah, you're not recorded.
I vote aye, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Towns votes aye.
The clerk will call the roll. Mr. Kucinich?
You are not, sir. Mr. Kucinich votes aye.
The clerk will call the roll. The clerk will report the tally. On that vote, Mr. Chairman, there are 21 noes to 12 ayes. The amendment is not agreed to. Are there any further amendments? If none, the question now occurs on the amendment in the nature of a substitute. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. No. The ayes have it. The amendment is agreed to. You want a roll call on the amendment? Oh, I'm sorry. No. The amendment is agreed to. Okay. I move the Committee on Oversight and Government Reform report the bill as amended to the House with its recommendation that the bill do pass. The question is on favorably reporting the bill. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. No. In the opinion of the Chair, the ayes have it. A recorded vote being requested. The clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Issa?
Aye.
Mr. Issa votes yes. Mr. Burton? Mr. Burton votes yes. Mr. Mica? Mr. Platts? Mr. Platts votes no. Mr. Turner? Mr. Turner votes yes. Mr. McHenry? Mr. McHenry votes yes. Mr. Jordan? Mr. Jordan votes yes. Mr. Chaffetz? Mr. Chaffetz votes yes. Mr. Mack? Mr. Mack votes yes. Mr. Walberg? Mr. Walberg votes yes. Mr. Langford? Mr. Langford votes yes. Mr. Amash? Mr. Amash votes yes. Ms. Burkle? Ms. Burkle votes yes. Dr. Gosar? Dr. Gosar votes yes. Mr. Labrador? Mr. Labrador votes yes. Mr. Meehan? Mr. Meehan votes yes. Dr. Desjarlais? Dr. Desjarlais votes yes. Mr. Walsh? Mr. Walsh votes yes. Mr. Gowdy? Mr. Gowdy votes yes. Mr. Ross? Mr. Ross votes yes. Mr. Ginta? Mr. Ginta votes yes. Mr. Farenthold? Mr. Farenthold votes yes. Mr. Kelly? Mr. Kelly votes yes. Mr. Cummings? Mr. Cummings votes no. Mr. Towns? Mrs. Maloney? Mrs. Maloney votes no. Ms. Norton? Mr. Kucinich? Mr. Kucinich votes no. Mr. Tierney? Mr. Tierney votes no. Mr. Clay? Mr. Clay votes no. Mr. Lynch? Mr. Cooper? Mr. Connolly? Mr. Connolly votes no. Mr. Quigley? Mr. Quigley votes no. Mr. Davis? Mr. Braley? Mr. Braley votes no. Mr. Welch? Mr. Welch votes no. Mr. Yarmouth? Mr. Murphy? Mr. Murphy votes no. Ms. Spear?
Mr. Chairman?
She didn't, I know.
Mr. Towns?
Am I recorded?
You are not, sir.
Vote no.
Mr. Towns votes no. You are not. Ms. Norton votes no.
Does anyone else wish to vote? The clerk will count the tally.
Ms. Spear.
The gentlelady from California requests to vote. The gentlelady votes no.
Ms. Spear votes no.
The clerk will continue counting.
21-14. On that vote, Mr. Chairman, 21 ayes, 14 noes.
The ayes have it. And the motion is agreed to. H.R. 471 is ordered reported to the House of Representatives favorably. I ask unanimous consent that the staff be authorized to make necessary and technical changes to the bill. Without objection, the motion and unanimous consent are agreed to. This committee stands adjourned.
Mr. Chairman, the gentleman asked for, pursuant to House and committee rules, asked for the 3 customary days for the filing of the minority views.
Without objection, so ordered.
Did we do everything?